In a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, an officer sat all alone. His uniform was dusty, his eyes hollow, and his world was crumbling apart. His young son had been missing for 48 agonizing hours. 2 endless days had slipped by as he searched relentlessly for his little boy, with no sign of him, no witnesses, no hints, no clues. Hope was slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. Then something happened that nobody in that cafe would ever forget. A little girl no older than 8 entered with a towering German shepherd by her side. She came up to the officer, hands trembling but eyes burning with unwavering resolve. "My police dog can find your son," she whispered. The entire room fell silent. The officer blinked in stunned disbelief. She wasn't a canine handler, nor connected to the police, and that dog was a stranger to everyone. So how could she know? How could a child make such a bold claim? The dog's eyes locked onto Daniel, as if understanding every word spoken. Then he stepped forward, sniffed the missing boy's hoodie, and suddenly growled, muscles tensing, like he had just uncovered a buried secret. Before Daniel could utter a word, the girl leaned close and whispered, "He knows exactly where your son is." What happened next stunned everyone and revealed a truth no one could have imagined. Stay with us. This story will leave you breathless. Before we dive in, be sure to hit like and subscribe. And honestly, I want to know, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. It's incredible to see how far our stories reach. The diner stood at the edge of a silent desert highway, the kind of spot where truckers paused for resupply and weary travelers sought refuge from the relentless heat. But tonight, it held just one man, looking more shattered than the cracked asphalt outside. Officer Daniel Hayes sank into a turquoise booth. His elbows rested on the table, fingers gripping a small photograph so tightly its edges began to curl. It was a photo of his 8-year-old son smiling brightly, taken just 3 days before he went missing. Daniel hadn't slept more than an hour since the Amber Alert blasted through the airwaves. His uniform, once sharp and pristine, now wrinkled, dusty, even stained with the tracks of dried tears he refused to acknowledge as his own. He had combed parks, alleys, forgotten back roads, abandoned lots until his legs trembled from sheer exhaustion. Every clue turned into a dead end. Every lead faded before dawn. His coffee went cold, his food untouched. Hope dangled by a thread, frayed and fragile. The waitress, a gentlewoman who had tried to offer comfort earlier, peeked over once more, but never approached again. She could see it. Everyone could see it. Daniel wasn't just tired, he was unraveling. He gazed again at the picture, whispering the same question he had murmured 100 times that day. "Where are you, buddy?" His voice cracked on that last word. He swallowed hard, fighting back a tide of grief. Officers weren't supposed to break. Fathers weren't supposed to fail. But that night Daniel felt he had done both. Outside, the late afternoon sun began to descend, casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. The world turned on indifferent to the nightmare swallowing Daniel's existence whole. His radio buzzed at intervals, but every update was the same negative search, no new leads, no trace found. Daniel closed his eyes, leaning back into the worn booth cushion. The silence inside the diner pressed down on him heavy as the weight of the entire world. He tried to pray, but the words refused to come. He tried to take a deep breath, but it felt as if his chest was being crushed. A seasoned officer, brave, calm, and unwavering under pressure. Yet nothing in all his years of service had steeled him for the unbearable pain of not knowing whether his child was still alive. As he sat there staring blankly out the window, a cold truth swept over him like a cruel shiver. Time was running out, and he was utterly lost on where to turn next. Little did he realize hope was already closing in on him. Daniel pressed a tired hand to his weary eyes, fighting to hold back the sting of exhaustion creeping in. The diner buzzed quietly with the soft hum of an old refrigerator and a faint country tune drifting from a worn-out speaker, nothing out of the ordinary. Just another slow, quiet beat in a day that had already drained him completely. Then the bell above the diner door chimed, a sharp little sound that made Daniel lift his gaze. Sunlight spilled in behind the figure standing in the entryway, casting a long, stretching shadow across the floor. At first, Daniel assumed it was just a traveler stopping to grab a late bite. But as his eyes adjusted, he saw her a little girl, no older than 8. Her hair loosely tied back cheeks, flushed like she'd been running full tilt. And beside her, tall and composed, stood a massive German shepherd, alert and steady. The dog's ears pricked forward, scanning the diner once, before fixing on Daniel with unwavering focus. No curiosity, no hesitation, just pure intent. Heads turned, surprised to see a child walk into a diner with such a formidable working dog at her side. But the girl showed no fear or confusion. She moved with fierce purpose and unshakable determination, like she was carrying a mission on her small shoulders. Daniel sat up a little straighter, uncertain what to make of this unusual pair. The girl stopped inches from his booth, her hand resting gently on the dog's neck, grounding herself. Her breath came fast, not from fear, but from urgency. "You're Officer Hayes, right?" she asked quietly. Daniel blinked. "Yes, that's me." His voice was rough, cracked from endless hours of desperate waiting. The girl swallowed hard, summoning courage. "My name's Lily," she said softly, eyes flicking down to the German shepherd who never broke his steady gaze from Daniel. "This is Shadow. We came to help you." Daniel frowned, bewildered. "Help me." His chest tightened against the weight of false hope. He couldn't afford to hold on to that, especially not from a child. Lily nodded firmly. "Your son is missing. That's not a guess. It was a fact." Daniel's breath caught hard. How do you know that she pressed both hands on Shadow's strong back, bracing herself before delivering the words that silenced the entire diner? Because Shadow can find him. The room instantly held its breath. Forks suspended mid-air. Conversations cut off like a snap in the silence. Even the old refrigerator seemed quieter, as if time itself had stopped to listen to what she was about to say. Daniel stared at this tiny girl, trembling hands clutching the dog's coat, wondering how she knew so much, or what power she held that could actually help him. He had no idea then that his world was about to be shaken in ways no one inside that diner could have ever imagined. For a long moment he sat speechless, eyes locked on the small girl before him, her frame, delicate fingers nervously twisting the hem of her shirt, but with eyes blazing a quiet, unshakable certainty. Shadow stood tall beside her, steady and resolute. His eyes locked onto Daniel's like he understood every word spoken between them. Daniel cleared his throat gently, saying, "Listen, sweetheart, I truly appreciate what you're trying to do. But this is police work, it's dangerous, and search dogs need specialized training." He hesitated, searching for the kindest way to say it. "Your dog is, well, more of a pet." Lily's face didn't crumble as he expected. Instead, she lifted her chin with quiet resolve, her jaw tightening with fierce determination. "He's not just a pet," she whispered firmly. Daniel blinked in surprise. Shadow was trained by my dad. Her voice softened, mourning threading through her words. Before he passed away. The diner fell even quieter. A couple near the counter exchanged sympathetic looks. Daniel felt a sharp pang of guilt settle deep in his chest. He'd spoken too hastily, too harshly. This girl wasn't messing around. She wasn't looking for pity. Her sincerity was unmistakable. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice gentle. "I didn't know." Lily shrugged lightly, her fingers brushing through Shadow's soft fur. "It's all right. Most people don't believe me." She glanced down at the dog with a small, bittersweet smile. Shadow wasn't trained for play. My dad taught him everything, tracking scent work, finding lost people. Daniel rubbed his face, absorbing it all. The reasoning made sense, but still asking a child's dog to find his missing son felt like chasing smoke. "Sweetheart," he began softly, "even trained dogs can't always—" Lily stepped forward, voice shaky but unwavering. "He can do it." She nodded to herself, gathering courage. "Shadow found me once." Daniel's breath caught. "Found you?" "When I was taken," her voice cracked, barely a whisper. "My dad wasn't home. I got grabbed outside our apartment. Shadow tracked me down. He saved my life." Daniel felt something shift deep inside. Not quite belief, nor sheer hope, but something he hadn't felt in days. Possibility. Lily locked eyes with him, her youthful gaze carrying a depth no child should ever have to carry. "Officer Hayes," she whispered, "Shadow can find your son. You just have to let him try." Shadow's ears twitched. His tail stiffened, alert and ready. Daniel looked back and forth between the girl, the dog, and the photo of his missing boy. Maybe this wasn't chance. Maybe this was the miracle he'd been praying for. Daniel hesitated, heart pounding, as Lily's words echoed in his mind. He wanted to believe. He needed to believe something. After so many dead ends, hope felt dangerous. Yet the fierce conviction in Lily's voice, the unyielding focus in Shadow's eyes, whispered to him that he had nothing left to lose. With trembling hands, Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the one thing he kept closest to his heart. His son's small blue hoodie, the last piece of clothing he wore before vanishing. Daniel swallowed hard and extended it quietly. This is his. Daniel lowered himself slowly, placing the hoodie on the diner floor, just in front of the German Shepherd. Shadow inhaled sharply, once then bowed his head with an intensity that sent chills up Daniel's arms. The dog breathed deeply, tasting the air nostrils twitching rapidly. Then Shadow froze. His muscles tensed, his tail locked in place, then bowed his head with a fierce intensity that sent chills up Daniel's arms. The dog drew in a deep breath, soaking in every scent, his nostrils flickering swiftly. Then Shadow locked in place. His muscles tensed, his tail stood rigid, his ears shot up sharply as if he'd sensed something beyond human perception. Every fiber of the dog's being snapped alive in an instant. The entire diner instantly felt the electric shift in the atmosphere emanating from him. Lily whispered softly, "He was on the scent." Shadow moved with sudden precision and intensity as if a switch had been flipped deep inside him. He circled tightly, nose gliding just above the floor, then returned to the hoodie, inhaling deeper and more purposefully this time. A low rumble escaped from his chest, not a growl, but a sound of recognition. Daniel's heart pounded fiercely. Is this normal? Lily nodded. Once he locks onto a scent, he won't back down. Shadow lifted his head, eyes blazing with fierce determination. Without warning, he lunged toward the diner's door, barking sharply. The sudden noise made everyone startle. He's onto something. Lily exhaled. Shadow waited no longer. He scratched fiercely at the door, pawing and barking again, urging the humans to follow him. His whole body vibrated with urgent energy. Daniel jumped up so fast his chair screeched across the floor. "Open it," he called out to the waitress, who quickly swung the door wide. As soon as it opened, Shadow bolted outside, nose glued to the ground, pulling hard, as if connected by an invisible tether to something far beyond the parking lot. Lily grabbed Daniel's hand tightly. "Hurry," she urged. Daniel hadn't seen him run like this in days. For the first time in what felt like forever, adrenaline flooded his veins, fueled not by fear, but by hope. Shadow had caught the scent already leading them into the unknown. Shadow exploded out of the diner with raw force, startling everyone inside. His paws pounded the pavement with fierce intent, nose glued to the earth as though the scent trail was a glowing thread only he could see. Lily sprinted after him without a hitch, her small legs racing every step, driven by unwavering determination. Daniel followed close behind, his heart pounding deeper and harder than any pursuit in his career. The late sun cast towering shadows across the parking lot, stretching long and dark like fingers as they followed the dog into the deserted streets. "Shadow, slow down," Lily called out. But Shadow didn't relent. He couldn't. Something in the air had ignited a blazing fire within him. The scent of the missing boy was fresh, raw enough to awaken every instinct inside him. Daniel radioed in while running. "This is Officer Hayes. I'm in an active pursuit with a tracking dog, possible sighting of my missing son. Sending location now." His voice trembled, caught between desperation and hope. Shadow darted swiftly through the street, weaving between buildings, crossing patches of dry grass, then suddenly veering into a narrow alleyway between two warehouses. His low growl vibrated through the tight walls as his speed intensified. Daniel's chest tightened in response. Shadow was onto something huge. They pressed into the alley behind him. Trash cans, old crates, scattered debris littered the alley. Still, Shadow never wavered, moving like a creature possessed by his mission. His tail was rigid, body-low nose glued to the ground. He sniffed, circled, then shot suddenly toward an opening at the far end. "Daniel, he's heading toward the field," Lily called out. Beyond the alley lay an open lot stretching to the outskirts of town. Dry, dusty, overrun with tall weeds swaying in the gentle breeze. Shadow tore through it, carving a path across the uneven ground. Backup sirens wailed in the distance as officers responded to Daniel's call, but Shadow pressed forward. He reached a patch of flattened grass and stopped so abruptly that Lily collided into Daniel, who barely caught her. Shadow sniffed sharply, letting out a single commanding bark. "What have you found?" Daniel gasped, falling to his knees in the dirt. Lily knelt beside Shadow, her eyes wide. "He's telling us we're still on the right track." Shadow's whole body trembled with tension as he pressed his nose to a faint tire mark barely visible in the dying light. He inhaled deeply and barked again, louder this time. Daniel's heart hammered. Someone had passed here not long ago. Shadow surged forward again, pulling them toward the far edge of the field. Each step grew heavier, charged with urgency. The scent trail was growing stronger. Daniel felt it, the change in Shadow's posture, the fierce intensity, the urgent desperation in his every move. They were no longer lost in the dark. For the first time since his son vanished, they were drawing closer. Shadow slowed near the field's far boundary, his powerful strides turning into a careful, deliberate stalk, his nose hovering just inches above the ground, nostrils flaring, chest pulsing with deep, steady breaths. Every muscle in his body tightened like a coiled spring. Daniel stopped a few paces behind, panting his heartbeat, thunder pounding in his ears. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, careful not to break the spell of silence Shadow had summoned. Lily stepped quietly to Daniel's side, her gaze locked on Shadow. She saw it right away, the stiff tail ears pressed forward, body frozen, except for the slight tremble in his muscles. "He's picked up something," she breathed. Shadow took a few measured steps, nose tracing an unseen path across the earth, before stopping in front of an old heap of scrap tires piled against a corroded metal fence. He snuffled sharply, short, urgent breaths letting out a soft, pleading whine. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Shadow placed a paw on one of the lower tires, tapping it gently, then nudged it with his nose. "Move it," Daniel stammered, his voice shaky. Officer Parker, one of the backup, hurried over just then. Daniel and Parker shoved the top tire aside, dust swirling like ghostly smoke. Another tire rolled free, then another. And there, half buried beneath the pile, something small and bright glimmered in the dirt. Time seemed to freeze. A tiny grass-stained sock, blue with little white stars. Daniel's knees buckled before he even realized he was falling. With trembling hands, he reached out and lifted the sock carefully as if it were fragile glass. His vision blurred instantly. "I know this," he whispered. "This was his. This belonged to my boy." His voice cracked on the last word. Lily's face softened with a sorrowful understanding no child her age should ever bear. Shadow had followed this scent here. That meant his son had been close. Daniel pressed the sock to his chest, eyes burning with raw emotion. A surge of hope, real and blazing, rushed through him like wildfire. "He was here," he murmured. "My boy was truly here." Shadow suddenly barked once, sharp and urgent, snapping everyone back to attention. His head snapped left, ears swiveling like radar, body stiffening tail, raised high nose twitching fiercely. "He has picked up another trail," Lily said. Daniel stood clutching the sock tightly. "Lead us, boy. Please lead us there." Shadow sniffed deeply again, spun swiftly in a tight circle, then surged forward with fresh urgency, faster and more certain than ever before. The first clue was uncovered, and Shadow was already chasing the next. He tore across the field with unstoppable intensity. His body dipped low, moving with the silent grace of a hunter, tracking a trail only his instincts could perceive. The sun slipped beneath the distant hills, the sky melting into a gentle amber glow that stretched long, eerie shadows across the field. Daniel sprinted after him, clutching the tiny sock so tightly that the fabric pressed sharply into his palm. Lily matched his pace, breathless yet resolute, her gaze fixed unwaveringly on Shadow's every move. "Stick close," Daniel called out to the officers spreading behind them, but suddenly Shadow stopped so abruptly that Lily nearly collided with him. His body tensed, his ears pricked forward, his lips curled back, flashing sharp white teeth. A low, menacing growl rumbled from his chest. Daniel froze. "Shadow, what is it?" The German shepherd stepped cautiously toward the far edge of the field, his hackles rising like a red flag. The air grew denser, heavy with an unseen charge that prickled the skin. Lily whispered, "He's sensing someone." Before Daniel could answer, Shadow lunged toward a cluster of tall, wild weeds swaying with an unnatural rhythm. The officers closed in flashlights, sweeping fingers hovering near their holsters. Then came a sudden rustle, fast and heavy, too fast for any animal. "Someone's here," Officer Parker shouted. A shadowy figure burst from the brush, sprinting toward the fence, edging the abandoned tire yard. The officers sprang into motion. "Stop, police!" Daniel yelled, adrenaline burning as he gave chase to the fleeing silhouette. Shadow raced ahead, barking fiercely, his paws churning up the earth as he closed the gap. The figure stumbled, but quickly recovered, vaulting effortlessly over a low metal barrier, as if this place was his domain, as if he knew every twisted corner. Daniel moved cautiously while Lily cried out from behind. Their chase wove between rusted machinery, collapsing pallets, and tangled piles of scrap. The dimming light deepened the danger, the shifting shadows, sharp edges, blind corners. Daniel's eyes never left the man ahead. Who was he? Why the desperate flight? Unless, his gut twisted, unless this man knew something about the missing boy. Shadow's barks sharpened, slicing through the tension like a blade. The man glanced back in panic and lunged toward a break in the fence. Officers scrambled to cut him off, but he slipped through the narrow gap, vanishing into the surrounding darkness. Daniel skidded to a sudden halt. The opening was too tight to follow without losing precious seconds. Shadow stood beside him, snarling at the void, his fur bristling with warning. Lily arrived breathless. "Shadow knows he's watching us," she said. Daniel's gaze pierced the blackness. The figure long vanished. This was no longer just a search for a lost child. Someone was out there watching, hiding, fleeing for a purpose. Daniel stood, rooted eyes fixed on the narrow fence gap where the shadow had slipped away. His breath shook not just from the chase, but from the crushing truth that the man had been lying in wait, hiding, listening. Whoever he was, his presence was no accident. Shadow paced fiercely near the fence, nose to the wind tail rigid. A sharp, urgent bark pierced the silence, a warning to the dark that he was ready to follow. Daniel rested a reassuring hand on Shadow's back. "Easy, boy. We're going to find him." But Lily's eyes weren't on the fence, they were locked on. Shadow wide with unease, her expression heavy with worry as the breeze stirred her hair. She seemed to wrestle with something deep inside her. Daniel noticed right away. "Lily, what's troubling you?" She stayed silent at first, then took a trembling breath and knelt beside Shadow, wrapping her arms around his neck. The dog gently nudged her, sensing her unrest. "Officer Hayes," she whispered, "there's something important you need to know." Daniel crouched down next to her, his heart rate slowing, anxiety shifting to hope. "Tell me." Lily hesitated, lifting her eyes to his. "Shadow doesn't just follow scents. He senses things, fear, lies, danger. My dad always said Shadow could feel what people keep hidden inside." Daniel frowned slightly. "All dogs sense fear, don't they?" "No," Lily said quickly. "Not like this." Her voice broke under a weight no child should carry. She closed her eyes for a moment, reflecting inward. "When I was taken, the words were almost a whisper. Shadow found me. Even though the man who grabbed me tried to cover his scent, using gasoline dirt, everything he could, but Shadow didn't track my smell. Daniel froze. Then what did he track? She placed a shaking hand over her heart. He tracked my fear. A heavy silence settled over them. Lily pressed on, voice small but steady. Shadow knows when someone near us is dangerous. He can feel it. That's why he was so on edge in the diner. He wasn't just sensing your son's scent, he was picking up the fear of someone close by. Daniel's stomach tightened. The man who fled from Shadow hadn't reacted to scent alone. He'd sensed the fear radiating from the figure hiding in the weeds, watching everything unfold. That's why he took off, Lily whispered. That man was too close. Too close. Daniel's hands trembled as the truth sunk in. This wasn't a random kidnapping. Someone was watching them, testing how near they'd gotten. Shadow barked sharply, pulling them back to the present. Lily wiped her tears away. Shadow's telling us time's running out. Daniel swallowed hard and rose. Then we move now. The chase had changed. Shadow wasn't just following a path, he was hunting fear itself. Shadow surged forward with fierce urgency, his paws tearing through dry weeds as he circled the fence line. Daniel and the officers hurried after him, their flashlights cutting swaths through the darkness. Night had fallen completely, the sky glowing with a faint purple hue as the last rays of sunlight slipped away. Lily hurried beside Daniel, clutching the back of his sleeve. He's tracking where the man fled, but also where your son might have been taken. Shadow came to an abrupt stop at a patch of flattened earth behind the fence grass, crushed in an uneven circle. Daniel's flashlight revealed deep tracks in the dirt. Tire marks, fresh ones. He crouched down, studying the grooves carefully. They looked recent, only hours old. His voice trembled with fear and hope. Shadow sniffed the tire marks intently, nose brushing the dirt, breathing deeply like he was memorizing every bit of the scent. His tail's stiffened eyes narrowed, and then he let out a sharp, urgent bark. He's found the trail, Lily whispered. Daniel glanced at her. Are you sure he only barks like that when he's absolutely certain? She knelt beside the dog. Shadow lead us. The German shepherd didn't hesitate. He darted toward the edge of the clearing where the tracks stretched on, winding through a dim dirt road twisting past an old industrial area. The air was faintly tinged with the scent of oil and rust. Shadow lowered his head once again, tracing the trail, but now his movements were slower, deliberate, as if he wasn't just tracking a smell, but analyzing direction, pace and distance. He's reading the path, Lily whispered softly. My dad always said dogs can tell how fresh a trail is by the heat left behind from tires or footsteps. Shadow's doing that right now. Daniel's heart thumped loudly. This vehicle didn't just pass by. It left not long ago. Without warning, Shadow lifted his snout, drawing quick, sharp breaths. He turned his gaze toward the industrial district, a maze of derelict warehouses, loading docks and forgotten factories. Daniel felt a cold dread crawl up his spine. Was Shadow leading them there before anyone could respond? Shadow surged across the dirt road, sprinting toward the line of silent warehouses, like he already knew the exact one. His bark cut through the night, a warning, a sign, a command. Lily grabbed Daniel's hand tightly. He's signaling the boy was taken in that direction. Daniel squeezed her fingers, then let go, springing into a run. The officers followed, close weapons drawn, flashlights piercing the darkness. Shadow didn't slow down. The trail burned hot, and whatever waited within those shadowed buildings was inching closer. Closer by the second. Shadow slammed against the first warehouse, shaking the corroded metal walls. He skidded to a stop beside a massive sliding door. Nose pressed against the narrow gap at its base, his low growl rumbled through the night. A warning only the fearless would defy. Daniel slowed his chest, rising and falling rapidly. This was the place, he knew it. Lily nodded silently, eyes wide, wrapping her arms around herself as the ominous warehouse loomed over them like a dormant titan. The other officers spread out, guns raised, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Officer Parker approached the door cautiously. Looks locked from outside. No sign of movement yet. Shadow barked sharply, startling the group. He pawed at the door muscles, tense, desperate to break through. His urgency was unmistakable. He wasn't just trying to enter, he needed to get in. A chill spread through Daniel. "If my son's inside, we're bringing him out," Parker asserted firmly. Two officers stepped forward, prying tools in hand. The screech of twisting metal shattered the silence. Shadow barked louder, pacing in tight, restless circles, his agitation mounting with every ticking second. Then finally a crack. The lock gave. Daniel grabbed the door and pulled. It creaked open slowly, inch by inch, releasing a breath of stale, cold air laced with oil and dust. Darkness engulfed the interior. "Flashlights," Daniel commanded. Beams cut through the gloom, revealing rows of rusted machinery stacks of wooden pallets and crates long forgotten. Shadows twisted in every corner, giving the space the feeling of watchful eyes. But Shadow didn't hesitate. He darted inside, nose glued to the concrete tail, stiff and unyielding like a compass locked on a single point. "Stay behind him," Daniel called, flashlight trembling in his hand. Officers followed their footsteps, echoing in the cavernous room. Lily stayed close beside Daniel, her breath shallow. "The shadows felt different," she whispered. "He knows the scent, but something else lingers." Daniel swallowed hard. "What is it?" Fear Lily murmured. Shadow abruptly veered left, yet he caught on to something deeper. Daniel swallowed hard. "What could it be?" Fear Lily murmured. Suddenly, Shadow veered sharply to the left, darting swiftly down a cramped hallway lined with cold steel shelves. Boxes tumbled behind him as he forced his way further in. Daniel's heart pounded fiercely with every twist and turn. They hadn't just been tracking a trail, they were stepping into someone's secret refuge. Shadow skidded to a halt before a weathered, rust-covered door at the warehouse's distant end. He growled low, clawing at the surface, nose pressed deep into the crack beneath the door. Daniel raised his flashlight, the beam quivering. Something was hiding just beyond that barrier. Lily stepped back, uncertainty shadowing her face. Shadow wasn't willing to wait any longer. Daniel's hand found the handle, breath jagged with nerves. Whatever lurked behind that door had been expecting them, and Shadow was ready to confront it without hesitation. His growl grew darker, reverberating through the narrow corridor as his paws scraped urgently at the corroded metal door. His nails scratched in frantic, purposeful strokes. This wasn't aimless or panicked. It was raw urgency, a sharp focus. He sensed something alive behind that door, something vital. Daniel edged forward, his hand trembling on the door's cold knob. The handle stuck fast. Officer Parker edged closer, flashlight tight in hand, sweeping along the edges. This door bore the weight of years untouched, welded solid on one side. Shadow barked sharply, unyielding, refusing to peel away from the narrow crack at the floor's edge. His nose pushed in again, inhaling short, feverish breaths. His tail held stiffly, like a shield bracing for whatever lay beyond. Lily whispered, "He's picking up the scent, the fear. It's thick here." Daniel's throat constricted. "That's my son." Shadow barked again, louder now, desperate. "Get this door open," Daniel commanded, voice cracking. Officer Parker and two others stepped up, crowbars poised and ready. Metal protested with groans under their relentless pressure flakes of rust, showering like rain to the ground. The entire door trembled with every blow, vibrations pulsing through the concrete. Shadow paced circles, then paused, staring fixedly at the door's lower right corner. His body stiffened abruptly, nose pressed flat against the wall. Lily's eyes widened in alarm. "He smells something else too." "What is it?" Daniel asked, breath shallow and tight. Before Lily could reply, a metallic screech pierced the air. Clang and crack, the door finally surrendered, swinging open just enough to admit the flashlight's beam inside. Daniel stepped in his chest, tight with anticipation. Lights on. Flashlights flooded the cramped space beyond the door, a narrow room barely enough to stand in. Dust thickly coated every surface. Scattered machinery parts lay strewn across the floor. But Daniel's eyes locked on something else immediately. A false wall, a wooden panel wedged unevenly on the far side. Fresh nail impressions, scratch marks, and a faint smeared fingerprint told a silent story. "Move that panel," Daniel ordered. Shadow lunged forward first, teeth sinking into the corner of the wood. Officers hurried to assist, pulling until the board splintered and gave way. Behind it lay a concealed hideaway, someone's desperate secret. Daniel's breath caught as he shone his flashlight within. A torn scrap of fabric, a small plastic water bottle, and a blue toy car with a broken wheel. His heart fractured all over again. "That's my son's." Lily clasped her hands over her mouth, tears shimmering. He'd been here. Shadow pressed deeper into the cramped space, sniffing fiercely, pacing with anxious, sharp breaths. He let out a deep, quivering whine. Daniel understood what the dog was telling them. They had been close, so heartbreakingly close. But someone had moved the boy recently. Suddenly, Shadow spun sharply toward the warehouse exit, barking fiercely, filled with renewed urgency and fierce determination. The trail wasn't cold. It was alive, shifting like a living thread, and whoever had taken the boy was still out there. With fierce urgency, Shadow exploded out of the hidden compartment, his claws scraping the warehouse floor as he charged toward the exit. His body moved with desperate surety, every instinct screaming that time was slipping through their grasp. "Shadow, wait!" Lily shouted, racing after him. Daniel was right behind, his heart hammering so hard it felt like it might tear his chest open. He glanced back once at the cramped, suffocating room where his son had been held. The abandoned toy car and ripped fabric, tangible proof they'd been only moments away. But Shadow was already far ahead. Nose pressed to the ground, muscles tensed like coiled springs. Breathless, Lily called out as she ran. "He's picked up a fresh scent. The kidnapper must have slipped away just before we got here." Daniel thought a burning ache flaring in his chest. Only minutes, maybe even seconds, stood between him and his boy. Shadow burst through a side door into the cold night air. The temperature had dropped mist, curling thinly over the dirt trail behind the warehouse. Flashlights pierced the fog as officers spread out, struggling to keep pace with the dog's blistering speed. "He's moving faster!" Officer Parker shouted. The hot trail led Shadow straight to the tree line at the edge of the industrial lot. Beyond it sprawled a dense forest, dark, tangled, unforgiving, the perfect place to hide a child, without a trace. Daniel's breath caught. "Lily, can he track through woods?" Lily didn't hesitate. "He can track anywhere." Shadow barked sharply, commanding, then plunged into the trees. Branches whipped past as he darted through the underbrush. Daniel pushed himself after the dog, tearing through thorns and brambles, the forest swallowing them whole. The deeper they went, the quieter. Everything became air thick with damp earth and rotting leaves. Even the officers behind them softened their voices, as if afraid to disturb the shadows lurking ahead. Suddenly, Shadow froze, not cautiously, but abruptly, nose lifted to the air, ears twisting like radar dishes. "What is it?" Daniel whispered. Lily swallowed hard. "He smells something. Something close." Shadow inhaled deeper this time, releasing a low, trembling whine that sent chills crawling up Daniel's spine. The dog turned toward a faint, winding path, veiled beneath the moonlight, cutting deeper into the woods. Daniel felt the air shift, thickening with a grim warning. Lily breathed. He's not just tracking scent anymore. Daniel looked down at Shadow. He's tracking fear. Shadow took a slow step forward, then another. Suddenly, he surged ahead faster than ever, driven by a desperate urgency. They weren't just close. They were mere minutes away. And whatever waited at the end of that trail, their entire world hinged on reaching it in time. Shadow tore through the forest, a creature locked onto fate itself. His paws thundered against the earth, scattering leaves and snapping twigs as he followed the fragile thread pulling him forward. Daniel forced his legs to match him, lungs burning, heart pounding in rhythm with the fear that gripped his soul. "Shadow, slow down," Lily called out, but even she knew it was hopeless. Not now. Not with the scent so fresh and fear so thick in the air it was nearly suffocating. The forest thickened around them, branches clawing at Daniel's uniform roots, poised to trip him at any moment. The moon lifted just enough to cast slender silver beams through the canopy, lighting their frantic path ahead. Officers followed close behind, their flashlights swaying wildly, tension tightening with every heartbeat. Suddenly, Shadow skidded to an abrupt halt so fast, Daniel nearly collided with him. The dog stood frozen, muscles taut, breath-trembling ears pricked forward. His nose quivered swiftly, and he let out a soft, unheard sound, an unfamiliar whimper that caught Daniel's ear. Lily whispered quietly, "He's onto something. Something important." Shadow advanced one cautious step toward a dense thicket, the leaves trembling under his heavy breaths. Daniel's chest tightened painfully. His hands trembled as he raised his flashlight. "Please!" he murmured under his breath. "Please, God." Shadow pushed deeper, nose probing through the brush. Then suddenly, he lunged, clawing, digging, forcing aside branches with urgent desperation. Daniel dropped to his knees, tearing the bushes apart with shaky hands. Soil scraped beneath his nails, branches snapped under his grip. And then he caught it, a cry so faint it nearly dissolved into the night air. A small, fragile whimper. Daniel stopped, his breath caught. The world compressed into one jagged moment. "Daddy!" The voice was weak, fractured, trembling. Daniel's entire being cracked open. He ripped through the last barrier of brush, and there he saw him, his son curled inside an old, half-buried storm shelter. His face streaked with dirt, eyes swollen and red body shaking from exhaustion and fear. "Buddy," Daniel gasped, voice breaking the boy's wide eyes meeting his. Then the floodgates opened, tears flowing. "Daddy." Daniel reached out, pulling him close, holding him so fiercely he worried he'd hurt him. Tears streamed down Daniel's face, mingling with grime and relief. Shadow whimpered softly beside them, nudging the boy gently, licking his cheek, as if apologizing for every lonely second apart. Lily knelt nearby, her eyes glistening with tears. He found him. Daniel held his son near, burying his face in the child's hair. "You're safe now," he whispered. "I've got you. Daddy's got you." For the first time in days since this nightmare began, Daniel finally exhaled. Shadow had accomplished the impossible. He had reunited a family torn apart. Daniel clung to his son, refusing to loosen his grip not even for a breath. Officers radioed urgently, their voices sharp with adrenaline, calling in for medical help. Shadow remained close, circling the father and son, like a vigilant guardian at last done with his mission. But beneath that calm protection, something had shifted in the dog's stance. His ears twitched, nose lifted. A low growl rumbled from deep in his throat. Lily caught it first. "Shadow knows something. Someone's near." Daniel stiffened. The kidnapper. Barely uttered, Shadow spun toward the darkness, teeth bared, barking fiercely, his voice shaking the trees. Officers swung flashlights, beams slicing through the dense forest. A branch cracked sharply. Heavy footsteps. A shadow emerged. The kidnapper tried to bolt once more, desperate, sprinting through the trees. He hadn't expected them to find the shelter, nor Shadow to track the boy with such speed. Panic clouded his movements. "Stop, police!" Officer Parker bellowed as he and two fellow officers gave chase, but Shadow surged ahead with lightning speed. The German shepherd darted through the trees, nimble and relentless, weaving between branches, closing the distance with breathtaking swiftness. Daniel held his son tight, frozen in place, his breath caught like a silent scream in his throat. The kidnapper glanced back just once enough to catch sight of the glowing eyes and snarling snout of the dog bearing down on him. He stumbled, and Shadow struck not with wild aggression, but with precise, controlled force. He pinned the man's arm to the earth, growling mere inches from his face. The kidnapper paralyzed, shaking powerless against the fierce weight of the dog hovering above him. The officers closed in immediately, slapping handcuffs around the man's wrists. Daniel, still clutching his son, moved forward slowly, his hands trembling, not from fright, but from barely contained fury. Officer Parker hauled the man to his feet. Why rip a child away? The kidnapper spat out dirt eyes wild with panic. He was isolated now, an easy mark. I've done this before. His voice cracked into a twisted grin. Knew every inch of this place. When I took him, I didn't plan to get caught. Daniel's stomach churned. You almost tore a family apart, the kidnapper sneered back. It would have worked if not for that dog. Shadow's growl cut deep, a darker warning not to say another word. Lily stepped forward, voice quaking, but filled with undeniable courage. Shadow didn't just track you, he sensed your fear. The officers exchanged knowing looks. None of them doubted her truth, not after witnessing what had just unfolded. The kidnapper was hauled away, struggling, shouting, but no one paid him any mind. His grip on power was broken. Daniel held his son, close relief flooding in tears that soaked the boy's hair. They were safe because of a brave girl and her incredible dog. Yet the night still held its mysteries. The forest slipped into an eerie silence after the arrest. No hurried footsteps, no shouted commands, no fear cutting through the darkness. Instead, a heavy, almost sacred stillness draped the trees as officers led the man away. Flashlights dimmed, radios lowered slowly, the chaos began to dissolve. Daniel sank down on the cold earth, cradling his son, as if the boy might vanish the instant he loosened his grip. The child trembled against him, tiny hands clutching desperately at his father's uniform. You're safe now, buddy, Daniel whispered, voice breaking. I've got you. His son pressed his face into Daniel's chest, weeping softly. Daddy's shadow found me. Daniel swallowed hard, tears burning behind his eyes. Yeah, he whispered, brushing the boy's tangled hair away. Shadow saved you, he was just a few steps behind. Shadow sat quietly but proudly nearby, his chest rising and falling with tired breaths, his fur tangled with dirt and leaves, yet his eyes never left the boy, unblinking, refusing to look away until the child was truly safe. Lily approached slowly, hands nervously clasped. She hesitated, uncertain if she should interrupt, until Shadow gently nudged her with his nose. She breathed out a shaky laugh and hugged his neck tightly. Daniel looked up at her, voice thick with heartfelt gratitude. Lily, you and Shadow saved my son's life. His voice cracked with emotion. I can never repay you for this. Lily shook her head softly. You don't have to. She glanced at Shadow, eyes glowing. Shadow just wanted to help. He felt your son's fear, he knew it deep down. Daniel's son reached out with small, trembling hands. May I pet him? Lily gave a gentle nod and stepped aside. The boy reached out his fingers, brushing Shadow's fur, and the dog leaned in softly, releasing a tender, comforting whimper. It was as if Shadow sensed the boy's fear, his pain, and the calm washing over him all at once. Daniel watched, tears streaming down his face, unable to hold back his emotions. The distant sound of sirens cut through the forest silence. Paramedics approached, carefully lifting the boy with gentleness and wrapping him tightly in a warm blanket. The child reached out to Shadow as they carried him away. Thank you. Shadow, the boy whispered with heartfelt gratitude. Shadow tilted his head, his ears flicking, as if the words had sunk deep into his loyal heart. When the ambulance doors slid shut, Daniel stood beside Lily and Shadow, placing a trembling hand on the dog's head. You didn't just find my son, he said quietly. You brought him back to me. Lily smiled through her tears, her eyes shining. He always finds those who are lost. Shadow answered with a soft, proud bark. In that silent moment, beneath the shadowed canopy of the woods, with the nightmare finally fading, they all recognized how a little girl's faith, a scared boy's bravery, and a dog's unwavering spirit had rewritten their fate. Shadow wasn't simply a hero, he became their beacon of hope,